Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Stuart Cohen. I'm the president of IGI Cyber Labs. We'll get started in just a minute. We're just waiting for some of your colleagues to log in. But while we're waiting, just be thinking about if there's any questions that you have. We'd be happy to address your questions right up front. We'll also provide you a demonstration of the Nodeware product so you can ask questions then or include them at the end. We want to keep this as collaborative as possible, really designed for either somebody that wants to see a demo but didn't want to have an individual conversation, but wanted to be able to ask some questions and find out how different people are using Nodeware. So we will get started in just a moment or two, but if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat or in the question box, and we'll make sure we get to that. We also have a few questions that were submitted in advance that we can get to before we get started. Why don't we do this? Let's move on to the first screen. So as I just said, this is an opportunity for you to see a live Nodeware demo, ask any questions that you have. As a little bit of background, Nodeware was originally developed by IGI Cybersecurity Services about 6 years ago. IGI Cybersecurity Services had been in the IT consulting business for about 10 years. In a classic build versus buy scenario, they got tired of using some of the historical vulnerability management products that, nothing against them, were designed to be run on Sunday nights when nobody was in the office in order to get a snapshot of what vulnerabilities were out on those devices. But the vCISO program and the penetration test program and others that were part of IGI Cybersecurity Services required the need for continuous vulnerability management, the ability to get an immediate alert when a new device showed up on the network, and for the ability to run during normal business hours without any network degradation. The organization put that in place. They were awarded a patent for it. They have another patent in place for it. And in a couple of years ago, the board of directors decided to separate the software product Nodeware from the services business, created IGI Cyber Labs, which I'm the president of. Frank Raimondi, who you'll meet in a second, is a part of, as is Mark Klein, who you'll also meet when we get started. But that's a little bit of a background as to kind of where Nodeware came from and how it all came together. So wanted to give you that background. We did get a question, right away that just said, I looked at Nodeware in the past and there was an annual subscription. Is that still the case? And we'll get into this in more detail, but we do provide both an annual subscription paid up front, and we have an annual subscription that's paid monthly. We also have a consumption program that allows you to pay as you go, as you consume assets. There's no contract required. And at the end of each month, what is your minimum high water mark gets calculated, or your maximum high water mark, I should say, gets calculated. And then there's a consumption model that goes against billing for that. And that is available through all of our distribution partners, through Synix, through Ingram, through AWS, through our partners at Rain Networks, as well as for people that want to do business with us directly. We have that flexibility if that's what you're interested in. With that, I see that we have one other question. Let me get to the upcoming events and then I'll get to the question. We do provide what we call the IGI Cybersecurity Thought Leadership Series. We just had one yesterday regarding QRadar and some of the things that IBM is doing with QRadar to help support small businesses. For those of you that are familiar with IBM and QRadar, it primarily had been something for large enterprises in the past, but they've made a number of changes to accommodate small businesses. And we had one of their distribution partners, Carbon Helix, on with us, along with one of the IBM representatives, and talk specifically about how IBM is providing that and how the continuous vulnerability management of Nodeware is integrated into the QRadar platform itself. So upcoming, we've got one with Eric Pinto from SOC Soder talking about how to manage security services and how to help MSPs, rise to the challenge of all the SOC requirements that small businesses are facing, both on the continuous attacks that are coming their way, plus the compliance and regulatory issues that continue to grow that small businesses need to be more accountable to and more responsible to. Also, for the seven-figure MSP members, we have an open office hour session with them coming up on the 28th. And then we have our next Nodeware open demo next month that we will have on the 25th of May with an MSP that just got started with Nodeware a few months ago and now is scanning a significant portion of his client base and has grown it very rapidly over the last 60 days. So it would be great to get Bill's perspective on kind of what he's doing with Nodeware and how he's using Nodeware. Should be a great session for you to get your questions answered. So, Frank, with that, why don't I turn it over to you, and then we'll get to a couple of the other questions.
Perfect. Okay. Did you want to ask a question, or do you want me to get going?
No, let's go ahead and get started, and then I will pose the questions as we get them.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining as well. As Stuart said, my name is Frank Raimondi. I'm VP for Channel Alliances and Partnerships, and throw in distribution in there as well. What we normally do on this is for me to kind of walk through sort of the scenario, looking at an MSP's view of the platform, some of the basics. We're going to do that, but I'm also going to do a second part. We're to go into a little bit more of a technical preview, or not really even that technical per se, but just sort of a deployment scenario. And we'll bring in our lead support engineer, pre-sales engineer, Mark Klein, who will sort of take through and actually show you how to deploy a new customer within your platform. Again, very simple. And the reason for that is one of our key points of differentiation that a lot of partners are moving to Nodeware from other platforms, or just saying they need vulnerability and see us and say, okay, I'm going to start with you guys, is the ease of deployment. And Mark's going to illustrate that a little bit more. So if we look at Nodeware, it is, again, a continuous normal business hours vulnerability scanner, vulnerability management program. As a partner these days, if you haven't heard about vulnerability scanning, you will very soon. And if you have, you're probably hearing it in new contexts or in additional requirements from your customers or your customers' customers, or potentially your customers' insurance agents or compliancy groups or things like that. So it is becoming a really critical element of cyber hygiene. Let's just start with that, and or a cyber practice or a security stack that you are providing to your customers. So with that, Nodeware runs and captures data in three ways. First is via a broad network scanner, virtual scanner that can be placed on any device. Could be a Windows sensor, could be a VM sensor that goes onto a VM system. And that's capturing, that's again the broad fishing net, capturing everything out on the network, from far edge devices like IP cameras and printers and VoIP phones, to the servers and desktops and firewalls and scanners or whatever. Again, if it's got an IP address, we are going to capture that and identify it to start with. The second way we identify or deploy is via agents on notebooks, from PCs to Macs to some Linux endpoints, as well as you can deploy an agent on an on-prem device, so such as your server or a desktop system. And what that enables is more of a fully credentialed scan of that device. And we'll talk a little bit about how to enable credentials on a network-based device as well. And then the third way is via an external sensor, where you can deploy or enter in an IP address, an external IP address, or a website URL, and we will start to do a vulnerability scan on that. It's not we want to make the distinction between a penetration test which is really kind of using, hacking tools, if you will, right, that are going in and trying to penetrate a device or a system. The vulnerability scan of an external device is just making sure that the ports are as they should be. If there's been any new vulnerability that's been discovered, and matching up against what we find in that configuration. So all three of those are what that is enabling us to do. Is every minute it's checking and pulsing the network to see if a device is online. Every few minutes, every 5 to 10 minutes, it's reconfirming the fingerprint of that device. And then once a day, every asset is re-scanned for all of our known vulnerabilities. And that means, in any given day, there could be dozens of new vulnerabilities. Maybe there's just a few, but in any case, we are checking against the known vulnerabilities published by Microsoft and Cisco and Adobe and whoever, right? Anybody that's got a known vulnerability and they publish it, we're going to capture it and put it in, and every day kind of do a check against the data that we can see via the sensors and the agents, and match that up against the database that we have. And once you do that, again, we're checking for problems or potential problems that are open ports or other vulnerabilities that the hackers and other could utilize to get into your systems. So a lot there said, let me get into it. So on this front screen, right, we can see the average score across, if I'm the MSP, this is across my customers. We can see how many assets are being identified and being scanned and how many are external. Some other news and stuff we put in there about just some general stuff, and then some stats. So if we go in and look at the customers, we can see at a quick glance that we've got some highly critical vulnerabilities on all of these four, and you can see how many there are. You can see the individual score of a customer or a client, and this is just some the warnings, and then this is how you would go in to manage that customer, and we'll get into that in a moment. You can also, and this is again what Mark will go into slightly, is adding a new customer and or deploying to a new customer, and so we'll save that for Mark's section. But let's go in and look at this individual customer, and we can see this 836. That's not a great score. It's not a horrific score, but definitely room for improvement. And we can see that across this customer, there are, we can see up at the top here, there's 19 assets that are being monitored, 17 are currently online. And the 2 that aren't online just means that it could be a remote system, notebook, or something that's just not connecting right now. But off the bat here, we can see these highly critical vulnerabilities. We can see via this green eyeball that the system is online currently. And then here we can see how it is being monitored. So this is a network scan that's not credentialed, and the credentials have not been enabled. This is an agent-based device, and this is a credentialed, an enabled credentialed, or enabling authenticated scan. So you can see the person filled in. And then down here, we also see the website. So this is an external address that is being monitored and included in this mix. Okay.
Frank?
Yes, sir.
Let me introduce. So we did get a question. So does having an agent on a device provide more information than using a sensor with credentialed scanning?
Than a censored device that where the credentials have been enabled, it's basically about the same level of deep dive, and Mark can clarify that, but I think basically it's the same.
Yeah, you get very closely, the data is very close in nature. The difference though is if you picture a circle, the sensor's trying to go into the center of the circle from the outside, trying to get into the middle. So it's going to see external ports that are open, publicly facing per se, and obviously with credentialed. The agent being natively installed is looking from the center of the circle out to the other side. So there's a slight difference in the ports, egress versus ingress, that credentialed versus agents. But on a vulnerability scale, credentialed sensors and agents, credentialed in nature, should be either identical score or a 1 or a 2-point difference. And that's just because of the nature of one's external and one's kind of internal to the machine.
Right. So thanks, Mark. That makes a ton of sense. Hopefully we answered the question. Please reply back if you need more detail on that. So let's look at, and here's a good example of that distinction, right? So this Windows Server device here has an agent on it, right? We can see that there's an agent on it. So that could normally be at a first glance is going to be a network scan. Second glance, if we enable the credentials on that, would do that. But in this case, we've actually put an agent on that to get that center of the circle out perspective and data. So let's look at this device or this system here and see what is on it and why this is getting a score of 0. And just quick explanation: this was a Windows 2019 bare bones box that was deployed without any patches or any updates being put on. So that's why this is a lot of these things would be normally caught through patches and updates. But in the case now, we can just take a random CVE here looking at this particular device, and we can see what the description is, what the vulnerability is known. Here's what's this telling you, confirming that what's installed, and then here, kind of importantly, telling you which is a specific KB file that is missing and not installed, which is causing this vulnerability. So that's great. This is actually a big help compared to older and other current vulnerability scanners out there, is to enable you, giving you this information so you know exactly what's going on and not just a CVE number. But more importantly, we also take you in, not every single case, but in the majority of the cases, we can take you directly to the Microsoft page that has the patch or has the fix for that particular vulnerability. So in this case, you can see the specific page. It tells you from the Microsoft what's going on. Here's the description, exploitability, right? Here's the updates and the patches that you can utilize, right? So that's a huge help. And what we've seen, or most of our MSPs that are using using Nodeware today, is that this is saving them anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes per vulnerability in time, right? In just the research time. And normally you would take the CVE number, maybe go out to Google or to Bing or wherever, and you would look it up, get some tips and tricks on how to fix that. Well, now we've done that right within this platform. So imagine you might be a technician saving seeing 5 to 10 vulnerabilities in a day and wanting to address them. Well, now we've just saved you a couple hours minimum per day in time, not having to research and get right to it. So again, that's kind of a big key feature that a lot of our MSPs are really utilizing and enjoying and appreciating. So a couple of things in here, just up on the top here. Again, we can see that it's an agent, that this is a critical vulnerability. There's also an element here. Let's say you did some work on a couple of these places. You can go ahead and request a rescan to kind of, minimally, is to check your work, but two, just to make sure that things are working and it's not being found anymore. It isn't going to pop next time the device is scanned. So kind of can prioritize that device to be rescanned. One of the other pieces that from a customer level perspective that I think is really pretty interesting is, let's say there's some big news about a CVE that's published and you just don't know, you haven't heard about it. And let's say this is 1900 devices that you're monitoring versus 19. You can go into this little toolbar, search bar here, and type in 2022-14, right? And as you get more specific, it's going to see that, we haven't found any of this one. Let's see if there's any. I think maybe there's a different number. Maybe there's 20-1. I think it's 13, right? So just by typing in, you get the specific device that has that vulnerability on it. Again, so just helping you filter and define and ultimately support your customer in a cleaner, faster way and reducing their risk. So I think that's just some other, again, get the IP address, MAC address. So again, the first part that the sensors and agents do is identify the assets and continues and keeps that updated. And then again, on a daily basis, we're managing those or managing the platform and giving you data so that whenever you come into this platform, you know that the data you're seeing is no more than 24 hours old. So let me go to the other key piece that people really want to see is the reporting. So the kinds of reporting that we do and the data transfer that we've enabled. So one thing that you can do, and again, if you got any kind of compliance or HIPAA or auditing types of customers that want to make sure you're tracked, you can do a schedule so that you don't have to think about when was the last time I downloaded this report or requested this report. In this scheduling, you can create on demand, you can do weekly or monthly. So in this case, you can check, I want to do a weekly scan or a weekly report generation on Saturday, and I want these 2 reports for all of my customers, right? And you can pick individual ones if you want or all of them. And so by doing this and saving this, right now, you know that every Saturday evening or Monday morning when you come in, that all these reports for your customers are here and available. And again, you might not use them, you may not pass them on to your customer, but if you do download them and archive them, you're kind of a step ahead of any auditing again or compliance issues. You can always say, yep, you're on what did you have? What were you finding on April 1st? Well, here's our file where we were at. So again, a very valuable element. The other thing reporting is on demand. So let's say you got a customer visit in the afternoon, you're doing a QBR and you want to bring the latest data, again, at a high level summary point and share that with your customer. Well, what we've enabled is any of the reports, and actually I'll just show you while that's being generated. You can see the different reports from network to top vulnerabilities, the log4j, exceptions of who's done what on the systems, etc. Again, you can run any of those. So this is available. You're going to download this file via secure download. And here it is, and it's on my system. I can open this up, and now I've got my report. This executive summary, again, is non-branded, so you can put your own logo on there. You can edit the file if you want, or you can just copy and paste the images. But what we're providing in this executive summary is a top 10, most common, and kind of a broad profile, right? How many devices are out there? What kind of vulnerabilities are they, and how critical are they? And again, just some basic information about what this report is coming from. Again, use case here is, you could come to the customer, last month when we started, we were at 800. We've done these things, now we're at 836. Here's our roadmap to get to 900 and next month, and then 950 or whatever it is. Again, so very, very useful types of data. The other piece that from a data sharing and availability standpoint, I want to call out is our API section. So in here, this is the API key for you as the MSP, and this customer, or this is your API across all of your customers, and we can go in and we can see what's available to be pulled. So again, anything you're seeing that I've shown you here is available in API, and in fact, it's being produced in this platform via the APIs that you're seeing here. So the UI that we're eating our own dog food, I guess you can say, right? We are using our own APIs to provide this. But if you've got capabilities or if you've got a platform you want to pull it into and APIs, everything is really right here and available for you to pull in. So we can go into any more questions on that on this call or in an individual setup call if you're interested. And then lastly, I'll just call out the support. And again, in here on our support, our knowledge base has all kinds of great information. Just sort of look at deployment that Mark's going to go into a minute. Right, you can see how to deploy external scans and Nodeware agents. Talk about Windows sensor deployment. Just again, start to finish. Just sort of do this, click here, do this, to click here, boom, you're on. What we're finding, and Mark can again explain this when he comes, is the best part about one of the best parts about the platform that our MSPs are talking to us about is the ease of deployment, in that they can be set up the customer, deploy it, and be collecting data in under 30 minutes. without, with very little hassle. And we've actually enabled some of our customers to deploy this in some of the FTC safeguard examples of car dealerships and other non-tech savvy, let's say, customers are able to do this on their own with instructions. So we're very, very proud of the way that we do deploy and the ease of that deployment. So again, we'll get into some more details there, but Stuart, if there's any other questions, we'll take them. Otherwise, let's transfer over to Mark.
We did get one question about an executive report. So I know we've spent a lot of time modifying our reports over the last couple of years. You may want to just show the executive report and how and what that looks like.
Okay, yeah, I did show that once, but I'll share it again here.
No, I know.
So this is again is what is available, and actually what I'll probably show as well. So again, just the quick summary is this is most common again, and the profile. One of the things I'll show that we've got in here is a network report. So let's look at this network report, which I'll download here, and it's available. Boom. So looks very similar, right? Great. Okay, but now what you can do when you scroll down, actually to the second page, what you can now see is the full assets on this device or at this customer, right? And so now we can go in and look at particular assets within the device or within this report within this customer. So again, it looks similar, but now again, if you wanted to go to any one of these devices, it'll take you directly to the information that we saw when we drilled in. So those are probably the two most common reports that are used. And again, when I mentioned about compliance and auditing requirements, those are probably the two that would be the most commonly required and stored. And again, you would never share that network report with your customer. Well, you may, but if not, you can and you have it. One other quick piece that I'll share that again for customers that have a co-managed location with an IT department, you can share, give access to a particular customer to their data. So you can put in their name and their email, they'll get an invite, but you can assign them as an analyst, which basically just says they can see the data, but they wouldn't be able to modify or make any changes or deploy. Or they can be a technician, right? If they've got ability to do anything on the site, or they need to modify or install, fix something within the platform or reset it or rescan it, they could do that. Administrators across all your customers, so that wouldn't likely be a scenario, but then you can also just assign it to the particular customer that you want to give that access to. So again, a very good, easy way to support co-managing of your accounts.
Perfect, Frank. Thank you very much.
You bet. So yeah, so why don't we? I think again, what I wanted to invite Mark, sort of the second part of our demo here today, is to show the ease of that deployment that we talked about and take you through that. So Mark, if you want to share and talk, we'd love to hear about it.
Beautiful. Appreciate it, Frank. If everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay. So what we're going to show here is the deployment of a sensor. Obviously, I'm in the same account that Frank was logged into, so everything looks very similar, right? So first thing I want to do, I have a new customer. I'm going to add a new customer. I'm going to call this company MX Ride. Contact is Mark. Last name is Thomas. My email, mxride at Nodeware. I'll make it at mxride.com. Company website, mxride.com. And I'm going to hit submit. It's now going to take me to a sub configuration. Here's the information I just added. Customer address, if I wanted to add that. Sites and interfaces. This is the external facing site. So you saw me just add my domain name. I'm going to add it in to get this scanning externally. And I'm going to use mxride at mxride.com. Hit submit. Oh, Why does not? Oh, got an I there. That would be why. So that's submitting now. You can see that it was added. So you can see it was submitted for on demand, meaning it would only scan one time. Well, I don't like that. I want to set a schedule. So I'm going to select, I want this done weekly on Thursday and update the schedule. So now every Thursday, that's going to scan my external domain name. Here's where I could download my agents if I wanted to. An agent is a one-to-one relationship. It would run on my laptop. But in this case, I actually want to deploy a sensor to sweep my entire network. Like, you know, there's some sub-configuration here to this. So I've created my customer. If I go back here, you can see the MX Ride customer just sitting blank. There's no data being collected. Moving on, I want to go ahead and add a sensor. I click on sensors. I hit download. I'm going to download it. I've already pre-downloaded it. The file's 100 meg, 108 megabytes. So now that I have it downloaded, I'm just going to launch it. Installer starting up. It's asking me for elevated privileges. And next, I found that we do require Java. Now I have two subnets. This is on my home network. I'm going to scan this subnet, 192.168.1.0. Next, next. And now I am waiting for an activation code. Okay, there's my activation code, 931A. So at this point, follow these instructions. It's telling you to go back to the dashboard, hit connect the sensor, top right, 931A. I am going to select MX Ride as my customer, and I'm going to call this sensor, I'm going to call this New York City. Okay, shows up top. This has been successfully connected. You can see down here, my sensor has been deployed. This is the key to the process though. It's not fully deployed. The reason I can tell is it says version 0 up in the top right. Now it went on to the next screen and I need to finish installing. So next, install. This will take roughly 30 seconds to complete. It's going to run through building the packages, installing the Nodeware service into the background, and fire everything up. And what I want you to pay attention to is where it says version 0 right here. That means there's no real code on this machine yet. Once that's done, you'll see that version change to the latest Windows version. That's just kind of an indication that it was installed successfully. So I'm ready to close this out. Give it a second and I can come back and refresh my screen. And now you can see it says version 2510. So I'm done installing. It's up and running. It's collecting data. There was one additional thing I could do is I could go into the settings of this, and let's say I had another subnet that I wanted to scan in additional. So you can see my internal address is a 1.142 address, shows my external address. So we automatically add that first subnet to the scan range. I could just do a comma separated and do a 10.10.0.0/24 if I wanted to. Hit submit, and it would go ahead and start scanning that subnet as well. But in this case, I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to hit assets to go into the assets for this sensor. And there you go. You can already see it's collected 18 devices on my home network. The fingerprint process has been completed. It will now go into the fingerprint, or excuse me, inventory has been completed. It will now go into fingerprint. It's going to pull back all my host names. It's going to pull back my operating systems. It will auto tags thing that adds to the vulnerability engine, and it will be submitted to that scan engine to complete the vulnerability scan. Let's see if we have an update to this yet.
Mark, how long typically would that take? to get the, I mean, this is 18 assets, just.
Yep. So to scan this start to finish on a new sensor, I'm going to want to leave it 2 to 3 hours to complete everything. But what you'll see if you check back in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you'll see, okay, all the fingerprint is done. The fingerprint will actually give a score to that device, and it will give a score to the device, but then all that data gets passed to the vulnerability engine, and it will do the deep dive scan at that point and do the full vulnerability scan. Now, if you have servers with large file systems, some of those could take a few 2 to 3 hours potentially to scan. Credentialed scans do take longer than non-credentialed scans. So it's just a matter of, there's no sense, like once you got your sensor set up, you kind of say, okay, cool, I've done that. Let me go on with other things today and just give it a few hours, if not an overnight run, come back in the morning, everything will be completed at that point. Or you can kind of look at it on a onesie twosie, check it every hour. But until the first scan is completed, you need to give it time, right? It's a slow, methodical process. There's a lot of data that we need to scan for and pull back, process on the Nodeware back end, and get displayed into the UI.
But at a minimum, minimum to get a real full data set is a couple hours realistically. So, Mark, actually, maybe two things I wanted to just go a little deeper on. One is the credential scan and/or agent deployment. Maybe just kind of show real quickly, when you have a network device, maybe on one of the other customers on the platform, what else, how do you enable a credential of a network device, and how do you deploy an agent for now that you've got your network sensor up and running? How would you deploy, push out agents?
If I wanted to, since there's no data on the MX Ride customer,
just go to one of the other ones. It's fine. Yeah.
We'll go over to Aperture just because we can apply it. So as you mentioned, or as I mentioned, this is a sub-configuration menu. If you wanted to add credentials, we use both WinRM as well as SSH. I would hit Add Credentials, add a nickname. I'll just call it MX Ride again for giggles. I would put in my domain name if I do have a domain name, and I would add my credentials for this. I would hit Add Credentials. Okay, so now you can see that they've been added, a WinRM. And now I would come back to my customer, click into Aperture, because that's the customer that I added the credentials for. And I added WinRM credentials, so those are for Windows machines. So I would filter down to my Windows machines by clicking the Windows tag. If this wasn't a sensor scan, I would go ahead and select the checkbox here. Actually, that's an agent, so that one's not going to work. Let me clear this list. Let me see if it should be. Let me come back to the asset list.
I think there was a Windows 10 device down there that was.
Yeah, so let's just filter by Windows. And here's an uncredentialed machine. This is one of two ways to do it. I can select multiple of the same machine that I know that the credentials I just add would work for. So let's say they worked for these two machines here. I would click this little key icon. I would say add my MX Ride credentials. I would select the benchmark, which in this case would be Win10, and I would hit apply. Now that's going to apply those credentials so that on the next scan, and you can see the little key icon shows up. That means that I just added credentials. So the next scan, whether the scan is scheduled to happen in 5 minutes or in the next 23 hours, because we will scan everything once every 24 hours, it will now log into the background of those machines. It will run as a service, and now I would get the deep scan data, be able to scan the full full file system. I'll be able to see what services and processes are running, understand the registry entries that are in there. And credentialed scanning, also there's an add-on that we've had that will scan the entire file system for log4j vulnerable jar files. So that is one advantage to credentials over just unauthenticated or uncredentialed scanning.
Great, super.
But Mark, we did get a question. What happens if the benchmark you select is different from the operating system on the device?
It will scan it using that benchmark. So let's say I selected Windows 2019 for Windows 10 machines, or in this case, I have two different. That's why you want to select like operating systems. So you'd want to select your Win 10 devices, add credentials to them. In this case, in this example right here, I'm trying to scan a Windows 8 and a Windows 7 machine. It's going to, but I selected the Windows 10 benchmark. It's going to run Windows 10 benchmarking, all known CVEs for Windows 10. It's going to run it across Win 7 as well as Win 8. Windows is a bit different. It will pick up a lot of data. So it's a large benchmark and it covers a lot of CVEs across a lot of operating systems. You're getting into Linux machines, Ubuntu, Red Hat. Those are more important to make sure you select the correct benchmark when applying credentials. So that being said, I'd like to just show you another way. If I click into this one asset that wins, I could also add credentials here, right? So I'm going to say disable. I'm going to remove these credentials. So now credentials are removed. Now I would say, okay, I got the wrong benchmark. It's still my same credentials, and I want to come back down and change that, and I want to select Windows 7 enable. So now you can see once that's submitted, credentials are re-enabled for that. Here's my operating system fingerprint of Windows 7, and we know that I just selected the Win 7 benchmark for that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, Mark, we have a lot of our MSP partners run an assessment and a trial for a prospect or for a current, if you will, kind of IT client that they're looking to upgrade to either basic or extensive cybersecurity services and solutions. Can you talk a little bit about how somebody would implement a trial?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways to do trials. One is you just replicate what I just did. Those assets are going to be pulled from your bucket of assets available for that. So in this case, we rolled out MX Ride. Let's take a look at this and see if any data is back. And I just said, I'm setting them up. Okay, it's already done some work. It scanned my external, it picked up my phone, it looks like, and now it's moving down the list. I can scope this. It has a total of 21 total devices. Looks like a bunch of my machines just went to sleep. So I could prospect that customer. I'd say, okay, I know that this subnet of this customer has 21 devices. Mr. or Mrs. Customer, do you have more subnets? Or what are your other subnets? I would plug them into my sensor. Like I did here, I'd go to sensors and say, okay, oh, they said they have another sensor. So let's pick that one up as well. I would come in here, I would comma separate, add my additional sensor, hit submit. Within 15 minutes, the sensor will pick that up and it will go and scan that subnet. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, that's all of your subnets that you have. Let's let this finish, at least get an inventory. And when you would go back into the assets for that customer, you may see that jump to 100. Now you know the full breadth of their network. They have 100 assets. Okay, I need to, and it's going to use my personal, me as an MSP, it's going to use my assets. And how many assets do I have? That's all identifiable under the subscription tab. You can see that I have a subscription utilization. I'm using currently 157 of 5,000. So I have plenty of headroom within my subscription to add new customers. If you wanted to do a trial, you could toggle on the 7-day free trial. This is only available in certain type of accounts based off of how you're purchasing. But in this case, this is a demo account. I do have it, and I could enable a 7-day free trial for the customer. The difference, we will scan unlimited. It will not be covered by your asset inventory. It will only for that 7-day period. IGI will foot the bill, for lack of a better term, of however many assets that customer may have. The real important part that you as an MSP would need to remember, let's say it scanned 500 assets. On the end of day 7, on that 24th hour and 59.59 seconds, as soon as it hits 24, or that last day, day 8, that now transitions to a live account, and it would look to pull all of the assets from your subscription at that point. So that's the crossover. First 7 days, Nodeware as a product covers the cost. Day 8, minute 1, it now becomes your cost. If you do not want that customer to be an expense to you, let's say you talk to them throughout the trial period and they determined not to move forward with you in Nodeware, what I would recommend is you would click on the gear wheel for the customer. I would come down here and I would hit delete customer, confirm delete. Customer is gone. You will not be charged anything. All of the data collected is not necessarily wiped out. It is turned off on the Nodeware portal, and there's no harm, no foul. Didn't cost you anything. If you did that on day 8, and you were on a consumption, that would be counted towards your high water mark, as Stuart was mentioning. So if you run 7-day free trials, make sure to have a decision by day 7. You're either going to let them convert to live, or you're going to come into the dashboard and delete them.
Great, perfect. Thank you very much. Frank, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to reemphasize the flexibility there and the ability for, as an MSP to figure out what you got, right? You don't know until you know. We've actually seen a lot of, customers, they've told us that, their end client tells them you have 50 employees, maybe we have 75 devices, right? And you add in everything. Well, because we're scanning every IP address, which is a potential addressable, hackable segment, right? We're going to capture everything. And so when you add in the cameras and the printers and everything else, it ends up being 2 to 3 assets usually per customer or per employee in that regard. So they may have 50 employees, but they might need 100 or 100 up to 150 assets under subscription and management.
Yeah, so, to that point, and kind of to Frank's ratio of 3 to 1, everyone's basically going to have a phone. They may have a watch. They may have even brought in some sort of IoT trinket or something to play with. It's powered by their USB port of their computer. You'll be amazed. Like, I just scanned my house, and I actually probably have to go back and scan it again because there's some. I have light switches.
You found something, did you?
Light switches showed up. Stuff that I didn't even realize or I forgot about that either need firmware updates, or maybe I just have to pull it out and go buy a new light switch. But it picked up my Roomba vacuum cleaner, like all that stuff that you don't even realize in today's day and age that runs a MAC address and IP address. They're out there, and those are all vulnerable targets for hack attempts, especially a lot of IoT devices in general. They're pretty loosey-goosey on their security to begin with to make them easy to install and run, and they are very, very hackable. So IoT is a big one, and people tend to lose track of them.
So let's talk about that a little further, because we just got a question about what does the notification of a new device found on the network look like? Maybe you could talk about the immediate alerting and how that comes together.
Yeah, we can share that. So there are alerts, and that is under the sub configuration of an account. Again, the gear wheel will get me to that sub configuration. And there's an alerts dashboard for every customer that is created. So here are all of the alerts that have been triggered for this account over time. What we alert on by default is critical vulnerability. Anytime a new critical vulnerability is found, you will get an alert. It will not, on day 2, when it scans it again and finds that same critical vulnerability, you will not get a second alert. You only get a critical vulnerability alert one time, and that's just to not overwhelm you as the MSP or your ticketing system. New asset found. If I would check my email for MX Ride that I just stood up, I would have had 23 new device found emails. So in that case, when you first set up a customer, if you don't want to receive those, you just toggle that one off for the first inventory scan, come back an hour later, turn it back on. If you're in a secure environment, 4 in the morning, and you start to get new device alerts, you know there's an issue. The third would be sensor offline. This one's kind of twofold. A, the sensor that I installed has gone offline. It means that the Nodeware backend has not heard from it in 30 minutes. That could even be indicative the sensor is offline or in an internet outage. So those are the 3 default alerts that we send. By default, it's going to go to the account owner. The person that created the Nodeware account would by default get those alerts. You can certainly change that email address there. Or if they want to remain the primary contact, you can add in additional contacts. So you can either add in a global support email, you could add in another user email, or if you use Slack, you can add a Slack channel, have all your alerts sent there as well. So up top, you can see I have a ton of critical vulnerability alerts, and you're going to say new critical found on an address. We limit the amount of data in the alert email because this is, that's basically for data integrity. We don't want to give away everything. So we'll just let you know you have a new alert. You come to your alerts with a link right to your dashboard, your alerts dashboard. And now for this one, if I want to go directly to it, in the top right-hand corner, there's a context button. If I click on it, it will take me directly to that vulnerability.
Got it. So we got a question about assessments. If there's an assessment that we recommend, we have a lot of different MSPs that use a lot of different assessments. They leverage our API and the output of our API to drive a score into the assessments that they do, whether they're simple spreadsheets or whether they're a sophisticated assessment tool. We do have a partnership with Security Studio and their S2 assessments. So with the API, you can set up a trial or an assessment for a new prospect or a current client, and within a couple of minutes have the ability to get the Nodeware output integrated into the S2 assessment, so you can get a holistic risk management view of your whole organization. That's about an hour and 15 minutes faster than if you used an old competitive vulnerability management scan that might run weekly or monthly or quarterly. If you had to set it up, install it, run it, cut and paste the output and drop it into their assessment. Once again, probably saves you about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half with our API per assessment and per trial. So a significant time savings for not only a lot of compliance organizations, but a lot of MSPs as well. And we got one more question about distribution. Frank, do you want to comment a little bit about how you can acquire Nodeware?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. The Synix or TD Synix has been our longest case of distribution. The SKUs are available there. Ingram Micro Cloud Marketplace is also have our products available on that, both the annual and the monthly subscription. We haven't added the consumption on there yet, but that's coming any day now. A third distributor is Rain Networks, which is a kind of a security-focused, value-added distributor. They are doing, sort of a very focused and limited number of vendors, but they are very capable to be, offer support in addition to what we have. So I would look at them. AWS Marketplace is also available for private offers. So it's you can go to AWS and see the public offer that just an end user would purchase. but that's at a pretty high price, and we have private offers that we can make available for you if you have other marketplace offerings and want to bundle in Nodeware. So it's a simple way there. And then lastly, I think you mentioned it before, if a MSP is interested in just trying out in smaller quantities, buying direct from Nodeware, they can do that via the platform that myself and Mark were showing you, and we can walk you through that. If you want to reach out, we'll be happy to walk you through that. So lots of different flexibility, there in the way that you prefer to purchase, and there's of course going to be some variation of pricing. So again, that's a factor that you'll need to look at.
Thanks, Frank. So if anybody's got any other questions, feel free to put them in now. We've got a couple of minutes. We will end on time to make sure from a calendar integrity standpoint, everybody can get to their next session on their calendar. A couple of things coming up. Eric Pinto from SOC Soder will be with us on the 27th talking about SOC capabilities and how to support MSPs, as well as for end users, what are some questions you ought to ask an MSP about their capabilities to get the things that you need to support your critical data, to keep your critical data safe, and also be responsive to, compliance and regulatory issues that are coming your way, as well as supply chain and customers, investors, board members that are worried about their data and is their data secure. We also have an open office for the seven-figure MSP folks coming up on the 28th, and we'll have our next open demo like this coming up May 25th. We've also, we'll announce another one or two cybersecurity thought leadership sessions coming up in May. So please connect with us on LinkedIn. Please connect with us on Facebook, on Twitter. And join the community, be part of the conversation with us on LinkedIn. We want to keep this collaborative. We want to be able to answer any of your questions. We're happy to make up, any end user that's interested in Nodeware. We will get you connected with an MSP, and any MSP that's a partner of ours, we'll give you private custom links that you can introduce people to any of our thought leadership series, and then we'll provide you anybody who registers for any of those events back to you as well. So with
Stuart,
that,
I'll just add from an event just where we'll be in the next few weeks. So next week we'll be at Kaseya IT Connect. Week after that we are at where are we at after that? I know we're somewhere. So IT Connect, and then we've got I'll be at CPX, but we won't be exhibiting there, but I'll be there if you happen to be there at the MSP Summit. Happy to meet up with you there. We've got the seven-figure live event, which is in the middle of the month. That'll be in Nashville. We'll be at the ASCII event in Newark. At the end of the month, we're actually at ASCII today. If you're happy to be in Dallas and popping by, be sure to catch us there. IT Nation Secure in Orlando. We got Channel Pro in the Bay Area. One way or another, we're going to be at PAX 8 Beyond event. We got some things working in there. So lots of opportunities to see us in person. We'd love to meet or demo, however, whatever we can do. We'll be around.
Perfect. Well, Frank, thank you very much. Thanks for everybody that's attending, that's online with us. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. There's some contact information. We're happy to set up a proof of concept. We also have a series of promotional offerings available. If you're an ASCII member, if you're a seven-figure member, if you attended the Robin Robbins event, if you see us at any trade shows. So feel free to contact us. Let's get together. Let us see how we can help you transition from, monthly, weekly, quarterly vulnerability scans to continuous vulnerability during normal business hours, and how we alert you when a new device shows up on your network. Once again, thanks so much for showing up today. Hope we could answer all of your questions, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you very much. Have a great morning, great afternoon.